That's me. You're probably wondering who I am and how I got into this situation. Let's take a dive and figure out who I am as we go through my top 3 races working with Team Saunders Tri. But first, let's switch up the music.
Hi, my name is DJ Otis. I'm usually chasing around Team Saunders Tri with the camera. If you've been to any of the races and run into them, you've probably run into me. I started chasing around Team Saunders Tri in 2020. The relationship came to be as a result of Tiffany being my teacher in high school and teaching me everything I know about cameras and everything I know about editing. And as a result of that, we've had a close relationship over the years. Once they decided they wanted to get neck deep into triathlon, they brought me out to film their journey. The huge benefit that I get from working with Team Saunders is the ability to travel and see so many of the great things, because Ironman's very known for having races in very epic locations and just the most beautiful places in the US and around the world. Some of the places I've been over the course of these past couple of years I've been to Florida, we've been to California, naturally been in Texas because we're here in Texas. We've been to Tennessee. We've been to Georgia. There's so many places that I've been to with Team Saunders Tri that it's hard to pick what my top 3 actually are. But I have to pick. So coming in at number 3. Number 3 has got to be Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga is one of the most beautiful races I've ever been to. There's some kind of just livelihood there, and the colors there are so pretty, especially coming from a production standpoint. The colors there are really nice, the people there are wonderful. It feels like the environment is so welcoming to both triathletes and spectators as well. I think one of the main things that I really loved about Chattanooga is the fact that they had this beautiful pedestrian bridge. And to have so many people on this bridge and have such good footage coming down, if you shoot straight down the bridge, you'll see that there's just a ton of racers there. You see some people walking, you see some people running. It was a tough course for the athletes that day. The other thing that I really loved about that race is the weather. The weather ended up being so perfect for spectators that it definitely made it a more enjoyable experience to go and spectate and therefore get some camera shots and get some good shots of Team Saunders Tri. As we know, Tennessee is pretty famous for its whiskey, so before I was brought to the airport on my flight back home, Caitlin and Tiffany brought me to Chattanooga Whiskey Distillery so we can have some good whiskey there. I had a flight of my own, Caitlin and Tiffany shared a flight, and once you get enough whiskey in you, guess what? You get a little tipsy and all that stuff. So whenever it was time to leave, we had to go straight to the airport, and they took me through a McDonald's. I was having a hard time ordering, and they just dropped me off at the airport. I was a little woozy. I eventually made it onto the plane. There was no issues getting through security or anything like that, but it was just a very good story and a very good experience being able to have that whiskey and get on the plane, you just get dropped off at the airport, you're flying solo, you're on your own, and I made it home and I had a good story to tell, and it was just a good experience being in Chattanooga. On race day, because it was a downstream swim, we had to walk from transition all the way up the river to get to the swim dock where the swimmers were jumping into the water. On that walk, it was a 1.4 mile walk up to the swim start. And as we're walking up there, it takes a little bit of time to actually get there. So as I'm walking there, I'm seeing the sun slowly come up, and I see all the different colors and the different hues in the sky. And I got to see some of the lights on the bridge as I was passing them by. And eventually, once it was time to catch the moment where Tiffany and Caitlin got in the water, the sun was just coming up over the horizon, and we had just some beautiful, beautiful shots of the sun just reflecting off the water, and it was just so dreamlike that it was just a great start to my production day. All right, coming in at number 2 has to be St. George, Utah. So St. George was a very exciting race because the athletes that I work for got their world slot as a result of having good performance in the season. It was really rewarding to go to an invite-only race and having a world-class experience. For this race in particular, we all flew into Las Vegas, where we made the trek all the way through the mountains and into St. George. I think flying into Vegas and seeing all the beautiful lights is something that's very stimulating, and again, just paints a pretty picture for me. As we're coming from Las Vegas to St. George, Utah, you see the scenery really start to change, and we stop seeing so many lights around the buildings, and we start seeing the orange hue of the mountains around us. And to our surprise, with the touch, you would think that it would rub off on your finger, that it would get you dirty, but it's just an orange rock. That's just what it is. I think with St. George, we're coming into an area where all athletes are at the top of their game. So it's a competitive course for everybody out there. Being in an area where everybody is taking the sport very seriously, it really heightens the level of excitement for everybody involved, including me. We're seeing literally world-class athletes perform. That course was a tough course, and unfortunately for Tiffany, this is the place where she did not want to DNF, but unfortunately the way that the cards played out was that she did end up having a DNF due to a mechanical failure. And from a production standpoint, having stakes so high for the athletes and having some kind of a monkey wrench or some kind of a problem thrown into the play really makes for good production, makes for emotional production and impactful production. And we know that Tiffany had a very emotional day that day, but she was there rooting for Caitlin like nothing else. On the way back before we flew out, we were gonna stay in Vegas for 2 nights. And Las Vegas is such a beautiful place. It's got so much energy. So to be in Las Vegas, and the city that never sleeps, there's always going on there. There's always gambling. There's always lights. There's always music. It's always a good time in Vegas. So I think the big takeaway from this race is that there was high emotions. There's just such different levels of emotions and different levels of energy. There was the great race that Caitlin had, and there was the DNF that Tiffany had. And then the good experience of going and enjoying myself in Vegas and just having good moments with good people is what made this an exceptional experience for me. Number 3 and number 2 were great contenders, but nothing compares to number 1, and that is Challenge Daytona in Daytona, Florida at the Daytona International Speedway. So the reason why Challenge Daytona comes in first is this is the first race that I got to do with Team Saunders Tri. I by no means consider myself an athlete. However, being able to experience this firsthand, this is going to be the first time I'm ever seeing what is a triathlon. I've never been to a triathlon. What's it like? I remember actually whenever I was filming Caitlin and Tiffany for the first time. Caitlin and Tiffany were doing a virtual makeshift triathlon. So they each had, the 3 legs of the race. And I remember being that Tiffany is the faster swimmer. Tiffany got out of the water and she is in her transition. And I asked, is this where you wait for Caitlin? And that's not the case. She does not wait for Caitlin. Tiffany goes on. And this is where I'm learning about triathlon really for the first time. What is sub 6? I don't know what that is. Well, guess what? They showed me at Challenge Daytona what sub 6 looks like. Being that it's my first real race, I'm taking in what triathlon really is and the energy that is in the air and how exciting it actually is to be at a race. That is where I kind of got the hook of like, man, I understand why triathletes do what they do, because wow, the energy here is insane. And to sit there and be at the International Speedway it was like a pipe dream. It was insane to see just how big the actual racetrack was. The swim was inside the racetrack, and then being able to look across the whole stadium and see all the different colors of the seats. And it's just very surreal to see how big triathlon really is and how big the community is. And it really was the first step of me getting injected into the triathlon community. I will probably never list a race as my top favorite race if it is a blistering day out there. And guess what? The temperatures were fantastic for me and everything was super accessible. That was probably the most accessible race that I've ever done with Team Saunders Tri. So I had no problems getting there and getting around, getting where I needed to go in order to get the shots that I was looking for. And this is when Tiffany and Caitlin were getting real serious about triathlon. They went out and they bought this camera right here. They bought the drone, and we had some great and not so great experiences with that drone. I went and got some awesome footage of the stadium there, and just to see how big it was and to zoom out with the drone and just fly above it and see actually how big it is relative to the swim inside and how big it is relative to the streets that are just outside there. Well, the story is that we now have a memory card that is called Felony Drone. We've titled it felony drone. And the reason for that is because whenever I was going to go get drone shots of the Speedway, I was approached by security saying that I was not allowed to fly there. And it is an FAA violation, and it is subject to a felony. So, teeth chattering, I don't want a felony. I set the drone down, I go grab my ID, and I bring it back to him, and I show him this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing. I was not quite aware of these rules, and he said, I could have called the police and charged you with a felony. So I was thankful to get out of that, but guess what? I have a great story coming out of Daytona as a result of that, and we always get a good chuckle out of it anytime we're bringing up the drone, or what we call the felony drone now, doing the hot laps. The hot laps were one of the most amazing things I've ever done. To sit in the car and go 120 miles an hour and seeing just how steep the bank was crazy. I remember having the camera on the gimbal, and if you don't know what gimbals are used for, it basically is a gyroscope that allows the camera to stay steady no matter what kind of movements you do. Well, because of the G-forces of driving up, again, pretty much driving on the wall, the camera was trying to do all kinds of weird stuff to correct itself for the G-forces that the car was applying to it. Being able to be on the actual track and experience the bank and the G-forces of that track was like nothing else, and it really showed me how fun that triathlon can be, because you get to have all these other opportunities to do exceptional things. The big takeaway with Daytona is that this was my first dive into triathlon and showing me what triathlon is really about. And I think that's what really makes it number one, is because that provided the framework and the infrastructure of what I'm going to be seeing on a regular basis with Team Saunders Tri. Every race that I've attended has its ups and its downs, but these are my top 3 races of all time currently. I look forward to seeing where we go in 2023, and hopefully to more World Slot Championships. And don't forget, if you see Team Saunders Tri anywhere on the course, be looking for me and say hello if you get a chance.